Hello, everyone, and to the Spanish and Portuguese speakers in the room, buenos dias, bom dia. My name is Saul Hernandez, and as a Mexican-American originally from El Paso, Texas, it is a pleasure to participate in the symposium. I'm the diplomat in residence South, and in this role, I recruit students and professionals for internships, fellowships, and career opportunities at the U.S. Department of State for the states of Georgia, South Carolina, and Alabama. Thank you for joining us for this panel discussion highlighting Hispanic leadership in foreign affairs. I'm very pleased to lead this conversation with three of our U.S. ambassadors. All of them have distinguished careers as diplomats and their own stories to share about their Latinidad. We will begin with introductions in a moment, followed by a moderated discussion. We are also happy to answer questions from the online audience. Please use the chat feature to submit your questions. My fellow Department of State recruiters, Josie, Dave, and Ryan will be able to answer many of your questions. They will also select questions for our panelists to answer. We hope our discussion today inspires you to consider opportunities at the Department of State. If so, visit our careers.state.gov website to learn more and sign up for our talent network. My colleagues will share these links in the chat. With that, we will begin with introductions. Ambassador Frank Mora, welcome. Can you please tell our audience a little bit about your role?
Thank you, Saul, and it's a pleasure to be here, a pleasure to be with colleagues, Ambassador Ponte and Ambassador Gonzalez. Yes, I am the permanent representative of the United States to the Organization of American States with the rank of ambassador. I've been in this post since January of this year, so relatively short. But I come to this job not as a career diplomat. I am a political appointee from the Biden administration. I am actually a trained academic. I'm a political scientist. I'm a professor, and I've spent much of my career in academia. I had opportunities to serve once in the Pentagon during the Obama administration as Deputy Secretary of Defense, and then now, as I said, as U.S. Ambassador to the U.S. I am a Cuban-American from Miami. Parents left Cuba early in the revolution and moved to the United States, where I was born in Florida, as I said. I've been very much part of that community all my life, in the sense that I grew up, I went to school there, and I've had academic positions in Miami. So I'm very much a product, if you will, of South Florida. I'll leave it at there and then sort of elaborate a bit more with the questions. Over back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Ambassador Mari Carmen Aponte, good morning. Please tell us a little bit about your diplomatic assignment.
Good morning. I am presently in Panama. This is my second post. I am as diplomatically is said, a non-career ambassador, meaning that I am a political appointee, and I served in El Salvador during the Obama years. And now I have been very fortunate to be assigned to Panama. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico. I learned English as a second language. I am very proud of my accent, and I find that I use that to relate to a number of people, Panamanians, for example, that I come across with every day, that also have an accent as they speak English. So I feel very much at home. I am delighted to be here today with Ambassadors Gonzalez and Mora. They are both fabulous examples of the best in our community at the State Department. But I'm also looking forward to talking to the younger people, because I think it's very important that this not be about us, and that we're only here to open doors for those of you who come behind us. If we don't do that, we have not done enough. Happy to interact more with the questions later on.
Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador. Ambassador Michael Gonzalez, good afternoon to you. Please give us an overview of your responsibilities in Zambia.
Sure. Good afternoon, and I'm thrilled to be part of this panel with such distinguished colleagues. I'm Mike Gonzalez. I'm the U.S. Ambassador to Zambia, and I'm concurrently serving as the U.S. Special Representative to the Common Market of Eastern and Southern Africa. I'm originally from California. I'm a career Foreign Service officer. I've specialized in Africa throughout 9 of my 11 Foreign Service assignments over 25 years. My assignments have ranged from Bangladesh to Uganda. I covered Ethiopia and the Horn of Africa from Washington, leading into 2 tours in Ethiopia, and then Zimbabwe. I was Deputy U.S. Ambassador in Malawi in Southern Africa, as well as in Nepal. I then came back to Washington, where I was the Director for Analysis of Africa in Washington at the State Department, before being selected to be Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for West Africa and the Acting Special Envoy for the Sahel region. Finally, I was appointed to this position early last year, and I've been in Zambia for just over 1 year. I'm married to another Foreign Service officer, Carol Jenkins, who works for the U.S. Agency for International Development, one of the 5 Foreign Service agencies across the U.S. Government, and we have 2 children.
Thank you, Ambassador Gonzalez, and thank you all very much. I would like to begin with a few prepared questions for the panel before answering questions from the audience. We're going to rotate the order of responses from our panelists so that each of you gets the chance to begin the conversation. So you all told us a little bit about your background. Each of you brings your own story and your own unique path to public service. Please share a little bit more about your family history and what led you to pursue a career at the U.S. Department of State. Ambassador Aponte, we'll begin with you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Saul. In the Puerto Rico of the mid-century, last century, my family came from a poor background, and it was because of education and the opportunities afforded to both my father and my mother in education that they forged ahead. They were both very successful. My mother ultimately became a University of Puerto Rico professor. My father had a wonderful, successful business. But somehow I knew that my future was not in Puerto Rico, that I had to go to the States, accent and all. And that's what I did. I did not want to go into the family business. I wanted to be able to forge my own life and forge my own future. And I should have known better because it was, of course, full of challenges and full of obstacles. Nonetheless, I learned so very much. I became, as soon as I came to study in the States, I became involved in the Hispanic community and fighting for the rights of the community, and became active in the then national, to La Raza, national organization, now Unidos US. But they, the Puerto Rican Legal Defense and Education Fund, I was active in many of the organizations that were at the forefront of the fights of making a difference for the Hispanic community, and they shaped me. They made me a much better person, and after I became a White House Fellow, I decided to explore for the first time in my life a diplomatic career back in 1980. And I could not find one Puerto Rican at the State Department. And that taught me something. And I knew that somewhere, somehow, I needed to get to be a diplomat and make a difference. That's why I'm here.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Aponte. Ambassador Gonzalez, the same question to you.
Thank you. So my great-grandparents are from northwestern Spain, the part just north of Portugal called Galicia, which was long occupied by Celtic people, where you still find people playing bagpipes and on occasion wearing kilts. So I identify as Hispanic, but I'm not Latino. My great-grandparents moved to the United States and went straight to California and did what they knew how to do. They were fishermen. My grandfather was a tile setter, my father a piano tuner, my mom a bartender. Not only am I the first in my family to go to college and get into any kind of professional career, but of three brothers, I'm the one who graduated high school. Sometime in the middle of high school, I found out about being an exchange student and applied. And as a 15-year-old junior in high school, I moved to Madrid and lived with a Spanish family for an academic year in an incredible opportunity that really opened my eyes to what it's like to live amidst a foreign culture, to see the world. I figured that's exactly what I want to do with my life. I was admitted to Occidental College and studied diplomacy and world affairs, and I was told you need an emphasis for that. And after a deliberative process, I thought, where can I make an impact? What fascinates me? What's not already oversubscribed? I settled on African studies. Went on to grad school. In the middle of grad school, I applied to the Foreign Service, and I haven't looked back. It's been an amazing career. What I didn't realize at the time is that the Foreign Service is not just a job, but it's a lifestyle. It's an amazing way to raise your family and raise your kids, and gives you an unparalleled firsthand role in history and an amazing journey. So I haven't looked back.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Gonzalez. Ambassador Mora, the same question to you.
Thank you. Wonderful stories to hear. As I said, Cuban American, born and raised in South Florida. South Florida, back when I was born and raised, it was very much a social enclave of Cuban Americans. There were no other immigrant groups at that time. And even though I lived in the United States, I did not learn English until I was about 6 or 7 years old. And so I was very much part of the community and always heard stories about Cuba. My parents' families are from the Pinar del Rio, which is the westernmost province of Cuba. And like many immigrant stories that you hear in this country, my parents came with nothing, right? And were able to build a very successful business and educate me and my brother. And like Ambassador Ponte said, education was critically important. If for no other reason, it was my mother was a tyrant, and she pressed upon me a number of things that I'm still, I guess, psychologically recovering from. Not just kidding, but thanks to her, I went to college and ultimately received a PhD in political science. But one of the things I want to sort of underscore is that I not only received a sort of appreciation for a Latino community, but for also Latin America. The conversations around the dinner table were always about Latin America, and the region, Cuba, et cetera, sort of fascinated me. It's so much so that I felt I needed to, I guess, get a PhD in it, and have spent all of my career as an academic or as a policymaker over, depending on when I served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, and now as ambassador working on the region. And for me, much like Ambassador Gonzalez, when I was an undergraduate at George Washington University, I had the opportunity to study abroad, to study in Peru for a semester. And for me, that was incredibly life-changing in some ways. I fell in love more with the region and fell in love with the diversity, not just of the region, but of the Hispanic community here in the United States. And so throughout my career, I've been focusing in different ways on these different communities and learning more about them. Again, not only in Latin America, but also here in the United States, and remain very much engaged, as Ambassador Ponte has sort of indicated in her own story. I should say that Ambassador Ponte is sort of a mentor to me in that respect. She is someone who's so committed to this community and done so much for it that she's led the way in many areas. So we take the lead from her, or at least I do, in terms of the many aspects in which we are trying to engage the community. Over.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Mora. And I'd like to remind our attendees that you can submit questions for our panelists or for me as the moderator in the chat. We've got already a couple of questions that we'll be answering, but we'll continue for now with the prepared questions. So for each of you, once again, Hispanic Heritage Month is an opportunity to celebrate our Latinidad and the contributions of our community. What are some of the highlights you've had over the course of your careers? And this time, Ambassador Gonzalez, we'll begin with you.
Great, thank you. You know, the Foreign Service provides one an amazing degree of access. When you call up and say, I'm calling from the US Embassy, you can hear people sit up and take notice. I would argue it also gives an unparalleled influence when you are overseas representing the United States. And Foreign Service gives us great stories. So let me tell you a couple of stories. A couple of years ago, I was the deputy US ambassador in an African country at a time of elections. On election day, things weren't going very well, and my ambassador got sick and was flown out of country that night. Elections dragged on a couple of days and looked more and more like the president was not going to win re-election. I scheduled the next morning a meeting with the president just to take her pulse and see how things were going. And as I was putting on my tie to go to State House, I got a call saying, don't come, she's doing a media interview. I turned on the TV to see the president of the republic nullifying the elections and calling the military in to break up the Electoral Commission. I spent the next 5 days working the phones and working my contacts across the government of that country as well as our own government. That night, I sat down in front of the president of the republic, and it was clear that she was not winning. And I expressed the position of the United States in support of the democratic rule of law and the will of the people going forward. I worked the phones, texting from 6 a.m. to midnight, the individual who was clearly going to be the president-elect, encouraging him to be presidential, to not inflame the circumstances, and to work with the U.S. Military to engage with their military counterparts to encourage them to abide by the Constitution. After a very tough week where I was the representative of the United States, the rule of law persevered. The president was sworn in, being the one who got the most votes. The lady president, who was not reelected, stood aside peacefully, and democracy prevailed. That's the role of the United States and American diplomats. Now, there's also great experiences. As a first tour officer, I stood atop a nuclear research reactor and had the commissioner from the Regulatory Commission point out the uranium rods and the control rods, explaining how it worked. In April of this year, I was 509 meters below the surface of the earth, looking at a copper mine, understanding how you extract ore and how it becomes a critical mineral feeding the global economy. I had a seance at midnight with ancestral spirits in Zimbabwe. In March, I had breakfast with Gloria Steinem. Earlier this year, I spent 2 days each with Vice President Kamala Harris and Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. By the time my daughter was 9, she had visited 39 countries. Apart from diplomats, who gets that kind of experience? Over.
What an excellent overview, Ambassador Gonzalez. Ambassador Mora, over to you.
Indeed, how can one match Ambassador Gonzalez's experiences? Listen, one of the things I wanted to emphasize is the importance of public service, particularly for immigrants, families, and communities. You've often heard that so many opportunities were given that the sort of spirit, if not obligation, to serve is almost overwhelming. And so I certainly felt that sense always. And so I've had these wonderful opportunities. But to me, that became clear when, as I said, I was in the Pentagon serving as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Western Hemisphere. And on that fateful day in January 12th, 2010, a massive earthquake hit Haiti, right? Where about 200,000 people passed away in a matter of minutes or hours. And you may recall that President Obama at that time went public and said, these folks will not be forsaken, and that we will mobilize all the resources of the US government to assist and help the people of Haiti. I was in a position to help. And so when the Secretary of Defense at the time, Secretary Gates, asked that I visit Haiti 2 weeks after the earthquake to assess and evaluate while our military was fully engaged in that operation, in that humanitarian operation, I saw firsthand sort of suffering that I had never seen in my life. But I was very cognizant that the United States was there and was in the process of saving lives. I can't quantify how many lives we saved, but I know we saved lives, and many lives. And in large part, thanks to, I think, US leadership, I was able to contribute, if only a little bit, to that effort. And that was, for me at least, in public service, one of the highlights of my career. Over.
Thank you, Ambassador Mora. Ambassador Aponte, the same question to you.
Yeah. I had the opportunity to be a White House fellow during the last year of the Carter administration back in 1979. A lot of you were not even born then. And the one experience that I had as a White House fellow was to hear President Carter address a group of us and talk about the role of women and the role of Hispanic women in government. But the one thing that he said that struck me, has stayed with me and forever changed my life, was that if there is a difficult problem, a policy problem, give it to a woman. She will get it done. She will solve it. That gave me such a sense of empowerment. I have never in my life heard anyone talk about women in such a strong and very forceful way. And I had always thought of myself as a Hispanic and then a woman. That changed that day. I was a Hispanic woman with a lot of power, and the power was within me. And that is the greatest gift that he gave me by saying those words. And I hope that as we look at ourselves and as we all plan ahead for the future, that we look inside and we find those strengths that come from not only Latinidad, but also our gender, and help us move forward. I'm sure that there'll be some questions around that topic when the question and answer period begins. Over.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Aponte. And we are starting to get some questions, so I'll make sure to leave some time so that we can answer some of those as well. And you teed up a wonderful segue to my next question. The department is committed to building a workforce that looks like the America we represent. Can each of you share an experience about a situation where working with colleagues from diverse backgrounds helped you accomplish an important goal? And Ambassador Mora, we'll begin with you this time.
Thank you. So I couldn't agree more with what I think is the premise of the question, which is that diversity and that having a diverse workforce is not only important for diversity's sake, not only because it's the right thing to do, it's the principal thing, it's et cetera. That's true. But also because I think it makes us better policymakers. When we reflect, as we've heard many times from President Biden, when we reflect much of what we look like and think in the country, we are a better country. We represent the country better in our particular responsibilities. So I think when the rest of the world, and particularly in the post that we have, sees that diversity, right, is exposed to that diversity, people from different backgrounds, they can really understand who we are and the strength of the United States, which is where that I think lies. I have tons of experiences, but I will say so this again, that in the sort of diverse workforce that we have here in the mission and when I worked in the Pentagon, having those different perspectives from different walks of life, different backgrounds, it really enriched the discussion and the process of decision-making, of policy-making, of analysis. And I like to think that as a result, the product that comes out at the end of it is better than if we were not reflective or reflecting the diversity that we are here in the United States. Over.
Ambassador Mora, thank you so much for that wonderful insight. Ambassador Aponte, I'll turn to you now.
Well, I remember with great fondness the time in my life when I practiced law, which was a long period between the 80s and about 2008. And I was appointed to the District of Columbia Judicial Nominations Commission. There was only one Hispanic judge in the DC court system. So I knew I had my work cut out for me. And in the commission, there were no other Hispanics, but there were African Americans, there were people from labor, the diversity was incredible. It became very clear to me very quickly that if I wanted to do something for my community and I wanted to make the judicial system in the District of Columbia look more like the community it was judging, I really need to get to work and make allies. And it was with those allies, with the African American in the commission and the women in the commissions, that we went from one Hispanic judge, and by the time I finished, there were 5. But it was all about allies, making allies, working this diversity and persuading them that the more the courts look like the United States, the fairer, the more just we would be seen as a country, but also we needed to do the work with our community. If we wanted our community to make sure that they obeyed the court orders, that whatever the courts were ordering, they needed to do, those courts needed to have a lot of diversity. Otherwise, it would have no credibility. So I look at those years, those 5 years that I was in the commission, with a lot of fondness, because I learned what I learned most was how to work together to accomplish one goal and move the community forward. Over.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Aponte. Ambassador Gonzalez, the same question to you.
I love Ambassador Aponte's point about making allies, and so much of diplomacy is doing exactly that. Look, as diplomats, our task, our job is to advance U.S. policy priorities, but very seldom in my career has that been pitted against what are the priorities of the countries where we're accredited to. Quite the contrary. Often these are our shared interests and shared objectives. And while we often will come in and say, this is what we want to or need to do, it is more important for our success to also think about what does the host country, host government, local population want, and what is the complexion of what we are trying to do that makes it localized and therefore effective. In order to do that, we need to know our audience. And I think Ambassador Mora gave great examples of what happens when you bring a diverse American staff together. And we absolutely try to do that in my embassy, certainly. But I would actually try to focus instead on the partnership between not only the 130 Americans in my embassy, but the 500 Zambian staff. In fact, I've established a local staff advisory committee that meets with me once a month, where we sit down and talk about what are the key issues that the local communities are talking about. What do you talk about when you go home over dinner and you're chatting with your friends over the weekend that make you passionate? What's working well? What's not working well? An example. For the United States, the promotion of human rights is a priority. And for the Biden administration, certainly it's a priority writ large, as well as the rights for LGBT people around the world. Now, Zambia is a conservative Christian country. And so how do we as an American embassy advance that priority? How do we humanize the LGBT community in Zambia, not because they're LGBT, but because they're human? How do we make our arguments, our advocacy, our engagements about rights? What words do we use? What imagery do we use or do we avoid? And so I've convened my local staff advisory committee many times to work out the tactics of our private and our public diplomacy to come out with much more impactful, nuanced, persuasive public and private messaging to the Zambian government to really advance America's interest in promoting human rights, which again is very much shared with the Zambian interests.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Gonzalez, all of you, for these powerful examples. I have one more question that I prepared for all of you, and then I'm happy to start posing some of the questions that our audience members submitted. So the final question from my side is, what advice would you give to our audience members who may wish to follow in your footsteps in a career in U.S. diplomacy? And Ambassador Aponte, will begin with you.
Well, no matter how bad things look, never, ever give up. I mentioned at the beginning that when I sought to follow a diplomatic career back in 1980, I could not find anyone to talk to. I did eventually find one Puerto Rican who told me, don't even try it. Practice law. You'll be better. Well, it had been very hard for him, not only to get in, but to advance within the ranks of State Department. But I never gave up. Something internally kept telling me that I needed to go back and I needed to try it again in some other form. I then learned that as the years go by in life, there are no mistakes, only lessons that you can learn. And in order to do this, you really have to look at life very positively, because if something does not work out right away, keep trying, come at it a different way, never give up. If you have at profound levels something that is telling you that diplomacy is what you're good at, and this is what you want to do, and the life that you want to perceive, please pursue it. And there are many ways to pursue it, but don't give up. In Spanish, sometimes we say, Dios escribe recto, pero con líneas torcidas, which means something like the really good things are often outlined with curves and bumps along the way, but it always works out. Over.
Well, thank you for those inspiring words, Ambassador Aponte. Ambassador Gonzalez, the same question to you.
Look, I would say this is an amazing and unparalleled experience, career, lifestyle. At the same time, it's not for everybody. So if you are interested, explore it. If you can be an intern or a presidential management fellow first to feel it out, do that. It's phenomenal exposure. Seek out informational interviews. I find around the world, people love talking about themselves, diplomats especially. And so find out about what is this career that I might be interested before you jump right in. If you are interested, apply. It costs nothing. And frankly, it's a bit of a game of Trivial Pursuit. And many people who are phenomenal in the career don't get in the first time. So if it's something you want, what Ambassador Aponte said, don't give up. Keep applying. I would say throughout the career, follow your passion. Because if you're passionate about something, you're going to shine, you're going to excel, you're going to stand out. Throughout your career, do your best. Become the expert in what you are doing. You will find challenges, but because you're the expert, you frankly have the best line into what the solution to those challenges may be. So bring those challenges forward, but also bring with them your expertise and your ideas on the solutions. And the last thing I would say, if you might be interested in this, but you don't really like, say, the politics or the policy or whatever you think diplomacy may be, let me stress, it is not just for political science majors. It's not just for those who focus in international relations. The State Department and diplomacy need experts in IT and science and health and marketing and management. Some of the best diplomats I've seen have been theater majors because they can remember their lines so much better than I can. And so much of diplomacy is how do you present and how do you persuade? And so again, it's a phenomenal way to live amidst, see the world, play a first-hand role in shaping the trajectory of the country where you may be in and America's trajectory with the world. Do it.
Ambassador Gonzalez, what an amazing pep talk and encouragement. Ambassador Mora, same question to you.
Yes, indeed. It's hard to add much to what my colleagues have said. I would just say one piece, and this applies to diplomacy. It applies to other things that you might be interested in and pursue. In addition to what my colleagues said, and that is, don't be afraid to take risks. Don't play it safe. Don't be comfortable. Obviously, calculated risk, as Ambassador Gonzalez, look into it, test, etc. But don't play it safe. I think I don't believe in luck. I'm not a luck is if you win the lottery, that's luck. But if you achieve your objectives, it's because obviously you worked hard. You did all the things that Ambassador Ponte and Gonzalez said, but also I think it's because you took certain risks when you were presented with challenges, and those risks have paid off. So be uncomfortable. Don't play it safe. Take that job that you're not so sure, but you feel that if you do really well, it can lead to other things. Seek those opportunities. I think they will serve you well. Over.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Mora. And of course, this is an excellent opportunity for me to reiterate something that I made at the beginning of our moderated discussion, which is that we have a dedicated website, careers.state.gov, that outlines all of the opportunities available to students, whether they are freshmen in college and just starting out or thinking about graduate study. Or for people who, across all walks of life, who are looking to join our diplomatic corps. So visit our careers.state.gov website. I also mentioned that I am a diplomat in residence, so I'm a dedicated recruiter in 3 states to talk to students and to professionals like you about our opportunities. And if you're in a different region of the country, you can visit our website, and we have a map that covers the entire United States, as well as Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, Guam, the Marshall Islands as well. So no matter where you happen to be, if you are a U.S. citizen, we can connect with you and connect you to these wonderful opportunities. So thank you all so much for answering my questions. Now I'm going to turn it over to some of the questions that we received from our audience. And I'm going to start with this one. Ambassadors Mora, Gonzalez, and Aponte, can you speak candidly about any times in your career where you question yourself or your path? What tips or experiences did you draw from to keep going? Ambassador Mora.
Well, that's a tough question, isn't it? Listen, I think we always are questioning ourselves, thinking about whether path A, path B, this strategy, that strategy. And I think that's healthy, in my view. I think it's healthy that you sort of challenge yourself and question yourself. It's part of the learning process, as Ambassador Ponte, I think, said. But what you have to do is sort of have confidence in yourself and your abilities. And I think you all do. Life is not linear, right? You don't plan your life and then you do this and then you do this and then you do this and then it ends up in this point over here. Life doesn't work that way. I'm sure that if you talk to any of us, when we were 20 or 22, we thought we were going to do X, and we're not doing X. We're doing something completely different. We landed somewhere else, and we're all very fulfilled and happy for it. So don't put too much pressure on yourself. Challenge yourself, right? It's okay to question, but keep that sort of eye on the prize, if you will, and take advantage of those opportunities that come around. Take the risk, as I mentioned earlier, and things will be fine. Over.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Mora. Ambassador Gonzalez, the same question. Any times in your career where you question yourself or your path, and what tips and experience did you draw from to keep going?
I would say I question myself every single morning. I wake up with this thought of, oh my God, who am I? Am I worthy for this role? Because in my mind, I'm still that scrappy kid from the other side of the tracks. Who am I to take up the time of someone important, like a company CEO, a parliamentarian, a minister, a president of a country? I didn't grow up seeing a professional environment modeled. When I grew up, we had one kind of socks. They were white and they had a little band around the top. Shirts were T-shirts. The first time I went into a professional environment, I went to Kmart. I bought a white shirt. I put it on. And after about a week, it had these horrid stains under my armpits. I'm like, why doesn't everyone else have stains under their armpits? What do? That's how I learned that people wear undershirts under their dress shirts. It's these kinds of things, place settings at formal meals. How do you engage in a reception? What is a reception? I still have a hard time fathoming that those important people don't see the me who I still am in my head, but they see the ambassador of the United States of America. Now, some people would call that imposter syndrome, and I'll tell you that it's very much alive and well and very real. At the same time, I would argue that that gives me humility. It allows me to exhibit candor and create human connections that have served me day in and day out throughout my career. And so yet, despite that questioning of myself every day, I still wake up every morning as the ambassador, and I go forth and I do what the American people expect and deserve of me.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Gonzalez. Ambassador Aponte, can you tell us about any times that you questioned yourself or your path, and what tips and experiences you drew from?
Yeah. I think both Ambassador Gonzalez and Ambassador Mora have been very, very frank and open with all of us. And I thank you for doing that, because I also have most every day at some point question, how does a Puerto Rican woman with an accent become a U.S. ambassador and go on and try and do a very good job every single day? No matter what, I feel that we are all here for a purpose. And once we get to opportunities like the ones the three of us have had, we use them for good. We use them to make sure that others see what they can do and what they can be. And for me, that is a driving force. And so when I have the doubts, which is daily, or at some point, I'm wondering, my God, was this the right decision? My God, what am I going to tell my country team about this? My God, how am I going to present this? I know that it will all work out, and that I have to have the faith in myself and in my experience to know that I can come across with humility, with candor, transparency, and that makes my work easier. The United States is very powerful. Puerto Ricans are not used to being in situations like these. But that does not mean that I can also be a powerful person inside, and that from those thoughts and that consideration of seeing myself as a person trying to do the best with the cards she has been dealt, carries me and keeps me going. And of course, I rely on the team all the time, on my team. My goodness, if it were not because of them, I could not. I sometimes feel insecure, but they guide me. They give me the reassurances. And sometimes they tell me that that's not the way to do it. And I have listened. I have had to listen and think it through, and they're usually right. So a mixture of humility, perspective, and trust is what gets me here. Over.
Well, all words to live by. Thank you so much for sharing so much from your personal experience and some of your doubts and how you've overcome them. So we have a few more questions and a little less than 10 minutes to cover all of them. So maybe we can see how quickly we can answer as many of these as possible. So we'll start this time with Ambassador Aponte. What does a day look like in your career? Do the responsibilities and duties stay the same every day, or are they always changing? I think I know the answer to that, but
they're always changing.
Describe it.
I never know. I don't think any of the three of us know what our day is going to look like. We have planned for a day that looks in one way or the other. It never works out that way. And so you really have to be very flexible. You really have to go with the flow. You really I can't really start doubling down on absolutely everything. And you've got to be compassionate, and you've got to listen to others. If you remain open, it'll work much better. Over.
Ambassador Gonzalez, reflections on your responsibilities and how they might be different from day to day?
They're completely different every day. I go in every morning with a note card of what's on my calendar for the day, and if I get 2/3 of it, I'm lucky. Today, I woke up and thought we were going to have a variety of meetings with visitors, and 3 hours later, I was sitting in front of the president for an hour. Sometimes you step out of a restaurant and there's a journalist there asking for an on-the-record comment and interview. You get a call that there's an American citizen who's in dire straits or who's been killed. There's the earthquakes. There's the speeches and lots of meetings. But I find that it's that variety and the kind of the ad hocness that makes it both fascinating and interesting day in and day out.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Gonzalez. Ambassador Mora, what about some of your reflections?
Yes, there is excitement and chaos often. Um, Ambassador Ponte is right. You have to be on your toes. You have to be flexible. I also have one of the note cards, but I actually don't have it with me, but it's on my desk. I try to get through all of them, but you can get pulled in so many different directions. And for me, that's what's exciting about this job, right? You never know, even if it's a crisis, even if it's something really challenging, but you welcome it. And I like to confront those right away. I don't like, personally speaking, a sort of day that's well planned and everything goes exactly the way you want. That's might seem efficient. It is efficient. But for me, that a day is one where I'm going from meeting to meeting and having to change the calendar because there was this crisis over here that we need to address. Those are the exciting days for me. And I wish, those are tiring days. It can be exhausting, right? But I prefer to feel exhausted at the end of the day if during the day, I had all those different and fascinating experiences. Over.
Well, thank you so much, Ambassador Mora. I think we have time for one more question for each of you, and that is a question from Ash. With a career so critical and demanding, how do you find opportunities to engage with your local community or with organizations and advocate groups while maintaining a focus on your professional career? Ambassador Gonzalez, can you start us off?
Time management is critically important, including self-care. Whether it's the gym on the weekends or setting aside an hour over lunch for lunch with your spouse, getting your calendar open up to go attend the kids' track and field tournament, those kinds of things are just as important. And I think those who exceed and excel in senior leadership positions recognize that the self-care is just as important to our professional success that the meetings and the diplomacy is.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Gonzalez. Ambassador Mora, some of your insights.
No, that's absolutely right. I think time management, discipline, but I want to sort of drill down on something that Ambassador Gonzalez said that I think is very important, that we as ambassadors, managers, if you will, we have our teams. And I think we have to be, as managers, sensitive to those kinds of needs from our own staff, right? We have to understand that they have families, they have a number of responsibilities and interests outside of the job that we have to be, or at least I am trying to be sensitive to and try to accommodate. Yes, the job is the job. We need to serve the American people. We have a task. We will do it. We will do it well. But I still think there's time to think about those other things, and we have to be as individuals, but also as managers, sensitive to providing our staff the opportunities to do those kinds of things. Over.
Thank you so much. Ambassador Aponte, anything to add?
Yes, the way that I handle some of those inner desires and inner needs that I have, especially to do community work, because I've done it all my life, I try to combine and view things from different perspectives. So when I have a meeting on the field with some of the indigenous people, I'm always very sensitive to making sure I understand what they stand for. I try to make it more than just an event for the embassy. I try to take an interest in them, and that provides me with a lot of the social interaction that I used to have in my private life. I think both Ambassadors Mora and Gonzalez have spoken about self-care. It's primordial. One has to be able to do that. One has to be able to find joy, even in the ordinary things we do every day, and look at them differently. So you can enjoy every aspect of your day, no matter how much it has changed, and no matter how what curves that the day brings you. Over.
Thank you all so very much. That's all the time we have for today's panel discussion. I want to thank our distinguished panelists, Ambassador Maria Carmen Aponte, Ambassador Michael Gonzalez, Ambassador Frank Mora, once again for taking the time to share your experiences with us, as well as our Department of State colleagues who are making this symposium possible. I also want to give a very, very special thanks to our American Sign Language interpreters, Vern and Gordon and Olivia. We have 4 more panels today on a variety of foreign policy issues, with the first one on climate change and food security, starting at 12:15 p.m. Eastern. Please visit our symposium homepage for the full agenda. And if you're interested in pursuing an internship, a fellowship, or a career opportunity with the U.S. Department of State, you can visit the resources link at the top of our symposium page. You can visit the careers.state.gov website page. And please, we encourage you as well to visit our talent network and sign up so that you can express interest in opportunities, and we can be in touch with you and keep you apprised of vacancy announcements and application periods for our different programs. Thank you all so very much once again, and have a wonderful rest of your day.